Story 62, The Price I Paid for Trusting My Wife. I never imagined I'd be starting over at my age, especially after 30 years of what I thought was a happy marriage. Sarah and I had built what I considered an amazing life together. We have 3 grown children, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and careers that have provided us with a comfortable lifestyle. We were supposed to be planning our retirement together, not ending up in divorce court. The day everything changed started like any other day. Sarah had been working late frequently over the past few weeks, citing a major project at her company that required extra hours. I never questioned it. She'd always been dedicated to her work, and her overtime had helped put our kids through college. That evening, she texted me, saying she'd be working late again. I decided to surprise her with dinner from her favorite Italian restaurant, thinking she could use a break from all the extra hours. When I pulled into Antonio's parking lot, I spotted her car immediately because of the personalized plates. She obviously wasn't at the office 15 minutes away. She was supposed to be working overtime, not dining out. I was curious and a little annoyed by this since she didn't bother to tell me she'd be eating out. As I walked along the side of the building toward the door, I looked through the windows to see if I could find her. I did. Through the restaurant's large windows, I saw her sitting in a corner booth with Mark Wilson, our neighbor from a few houses down the street. They were sitting unusually close, and Sarah was laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting on his arm. There was absolutely no reason that my wife would ever be around Mark. He and his family were acquaintances at best. People that you see at the yearly neighborhood holiday get-togethers. I felt nauseous as I watched them together, their body language screaming intimacy that went far beyond neighborly friendship. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. I told myself I was being paranoid, that there had to be a reasonable explanation. Then I watched in horror as Sarah leaned in and kissed him, not a friendly peck, but a full-on deep emotional kiss like she'd give me. I started recording, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hold the phone steady. I've never had that feeling in my life until this moment. At this point, my blood felt like it was starting to boil. I could feel the heat from my anger on my cheeks and the blood pumping through my temple. You could tell they were lost in their own world, completely oblivious to me standing outside the restaurant, just looking at them through the window. The video captured everything, their intimate conversation, the way Mark kept touching her hand, and another deep kiss that made me physically ill to watch. After recording them, I walked into the restaurant. The hostess started to greet me, but I was already moving past her, heading straight for their table. I arrived just as they were pulling apart from yet another cheater's kiss. Sarah turned, and her eyes met mine. The color drained from her face. Mark knocked over his wine glass as he jerked away from her. Without saying a word, I held my hand up and pulled off my wedding ring. I placed it on the table in front of Mark, turned, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear Sarah literally scream my name in what sounded like panic. I didn't look back, I just kept moving forward until I noticed I was in my car. I barely remember getting into it and driving home, my mind completely blank except for the image of them kissing and playing on repeat. At home, I moved on autopilot. I went to our bedroom and pulled out my suitcase, methodically packing clothes and necessities. I retrieved my important documents from our home office. I grabbed my birth certificate, passport, and anything else I thought I might need, including the large folder that had our marriage license from decades ago. Sarah had been calling my phone non-stop, but I silenced it, only glancing at the increasingly desperate text messages. I was getting the full barrage of "please come home. It's not what you think. We need to talk about this. I'm so sorry. Please answer your phone. Don't do anything crazy." Yeah, she was telling me not to do anything crazy. You know, like having an affair with a neighbor and lying to her family as she cheated on all of us. When you cheat with someone, you're cheating on more than your spouse. I ended up checking into a hotel 20 minutes away and finally allowed myself to feel the full emotional impact of what had happened. Okay, so I cried like a baby. 30 years of marriage, 3 children, countless memories, all shit on now by her betrayal. As you can guess, I contacted a divorce attorney the next day and scheduled a consultation for the following week. Apparently, a lot of people were getting divorced. Sarah's messages continued through the night, alternating between begging for forgiveness and trying to explain away what I'd seen. By morning, she'd involved our children. Our oldest daughter Emma called first, saying her mother was hysterical and claiming there had been a terrible misunderstanding. I responded by sending her the video. The silence that followed told me everything. A few minutes later, she texted back, "Oh, Dad. I'm so sorry. Our other children received the video from Emma. She had immediately sent it to her siblings after calling them to tell them what was going on. Sarah tried to spin her version of events for them. Their responses were all very similar. The kids were shocked, disgusted with their mom, and unwaveringly supportive of me. My attorney moved quickly once they were onboarded, citing infidelity as grounds for divorce. Sarah contested at first, but the video evidence was irrefutable. Our state is a no-fault state where adultery still carries weight in divorce proceedings. While we would still split our assets equally, the house, cars, and bank accounts, I wouldn't be required to pay alimony despite being the primary breadwinner throughout our marriage. I never even considered not telling Mark's wife. I knew it would probably end their marriage, but what the hell? Mark can consider it my present, so he can be with my wife without having to hide it. I forwarded her the video with a simple message: "I'm sorry you have to find out this way." Linda filed for divorce the following week after finding out Mark was cheating with my wife. Initially, we had a brief conversation after I sent the video. Then, over the next few months, our lawyers shared all findings with each other to support our cases. Linda was able to dig up some dirt after looking through their financials and phone records. Sarah's attempts to save our marriage became increasingly desperate after I caught her with Mark. The morning after I left, I found her sitting in her car outside my hotel. She must have tracked my phone's location. I walked past her to my car, ignoring her tears and pleas to talk. That afternoon, she showed up at my office with lunch from our favorite deli. My secretary, who'd already heard what happened, turned her away. Sarah left the food with a handwritten letter explaining how she'd lost her way but still loved me. I threw both in the trash. A week later, she ambushed me at our usual Sunday brunch spot. She'd convinced the waitress to seat her at our regular table. I turned around and left as soon as I saw her. She followed me to the parking lot, crying that Mark meant nothing and was just a stupid mistake. I surprised her when I angrily turned on her and pointed out that she threw away our family for something she said didn't mean anything to her. This sent her over the edge as I walked away. The most dramatic attempt came during a family dinner at Emma's house. Sarah wasn't invited, but she showed up anyway, claiming she needed to explain everything to all of us at once. She'd prepared a speech about how we could rebuild trust. Emma asked her to leave, but Sarah refused until our son-in-law threatened to call the police. She even involved our pastor and arranged a chance meeting after Sunday service. He awkwardly attempted to counsel me about forgiveness while Sarah stood there with tears streaming down her face. I reminded them both that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. The holidays were particularly rough. Sarah mailed Christmas presents to everyone, including me. The kids returned theirs unopened. I donated mine to charity without checking what was inside. She then parked outside my apartment on Christmas Eve and sat on my doorstep until I came home from seeing the kids. She cried and begged me to let her come in so we could talk. I refused and she finally left after another hour of sitting outside my door in the cold. Her final attempt was the most manipulative. She attempted to have the court force me into some sort of marriage counseling. My lawyers quickly put that to bed since there was no requirement for it. Through it all, Sarah kept insisting she'd never meant to fall for Mark, that it had just happened. She offered to quit her job, move wherever I wanted, go to counseling, anything to save our marriage. But she didn't understand that she shattered my trust, and it couldn't be glued back together with grand gestures and her tearful promises. The breaking point came when she showed up at my apartment drunk one night, screaming that she'd rather die than lose me. I had to call her sister to come get her. That's when I told Sarah that if she didn't stop these attempts at reconciliation, I'd file a restraining order. She finally seemed to understand it was truly over. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings and adjusting to my new reality. I even went to a personal therapist so I could unload some of the baggage I was feeling. I moved into a comfortable apartment and started taking care of myself. I bought a ton of new stuff. I have no idea why other than everything felt like it was tainted. If I look back, I would say that within a few months of separation, I had almost nothing left that I took from the relationship. Our children, all in their 20s now and living their own lives, made it clear to my wife that they stood by me. They maintained minimal contact with their mother, unable to forgive her betrayal and the way she tried to manipulate the message after getting caught. Sarah's life unraveled quickly. She moved in with her sister after the house was sold. Her parents were furious with her because now the kids wouldn't come to see them anytime their mom was there, making it clear to their grandparents that they wouldn't spend any holiday time with her. I think that's a bit much and I told them that they would need to reconcile with her in the future because they were forcing their grandparents to choose her or them. That's not fair to her family. Mark was taken to the cleaners thanks to a postnuptial agreement put in place after his first time getting caught cheating. This wasn't his first cheating rodeo, but it was his last with Linda. He lost control of his business, and since he's still in his 40s, they still have school-age kids. Linda called me in as a witness during their divorce proceedings, and Mark ended up getting taken to the cleaners. Sarah's reputation in our social circle was destroyed, particularly after people learned she'd tried to lie to our children about the affair. The divorce was finalized about 7 months after that night at Antonio's. I learned through some of our friends that Sarah had started seeing a therapist. I'm not sure why, since we weren't staying together. She sent me a letter of apology, taking full responsibility for her actions without making excuses or trying to shift blame. I appreciated the gesture, but that particular water has long since passed under the bridge. Our paths still cross occasionally at family events, our middle son's wedding last spring and our first grandchild's christening. We're civil, but I keep a distance. The children maintain a strained relationship with their mother, including her in significant life events but keeping her at arm's length. The trust she broke wasn't just with me, it extended to our entire family. I ran into Linda at the grocery store 1 year after the divorce. We chatted briefly about how our lives had changed. She'd kept the house and sold off the controlling interest in Mark's business, effectively ruining him. Mark had moved back to his home state to start over. Linda asked if I was dating again, and I admitted I'd had a few coffee dates but wasn't ready for anything serious. She told me to contact her if I wanted to get some coffee, which I never took her up on. My ex eventually left her job and moved to California, telling the kids she needed a fresh start. Our children tell me she's dating someone new and seems to be doing better, though they maintain firm boundaries with her. They've made it clear they'll never fully trust her again, a consequence she'll have to live with for the rest of her life. I'm considering early retirement. I have a considerable inheritance that's been sitting in the bank since my mom passed away years ago. I've lost a bit of myself in this, and I think I want to live on a beach somewhere. The hardest part wasn't losing Sarah, it was losing my faith in 30 years of memories. I've learned to accept that those memories are still real, even if the person I shared them with wasn't who I thought she was. Our children have been my greatest source of strength throughout this ordeal. They've shown remarkable maturity in handling the situation, supporting me while processing their own feelings of betrayal and disappointment. We've grown closer through this experience, finding strength in our honesty with each other. Looking back, there were probably signs I missed or chose to ignore. The late nights at work had started gradually, along with new clothes and a renewed interest in her appearance. She'd become protective of her phone and spent more time with Linda, presumably to stay close to Mark. But after 30 years of marriage, trust becomes automatic. You stop questioning the small changes because you believe in the foundation you've built together. At least the affair was short. Sarah had admitted to everything and it had only been going on for a few weeks before I caught her. This was supported by Linda during her divorce. The video still sits in my phone storage, though I haven't watched it since the divorce proceedings. Sometimes I'm tempted to delete it, to erase that final piece of evidence of her betrayal. I keep it as a reminder. Every time I get lonely or think of returning one of Sarah's calls, I just watch the video. As I write this, I'm staying with Emma and her family until I decide what to do. Like I mentioned, I'm leaning heavily towards selling everything and moving to the beach. I never expected to be making these decisions in my mid-50s, but life rarely follows the plans we make.
I only post new and unique content. Please like and subscribe.